Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. So if you think about video today and how we can better leverage it, we're quickly evolving a lot of our best practices into some cookie cutter actions that I can't stand, and I know we can do a lot better. I'm excited to talk to today's guest because her company's helping a lot of news agencies and marketers and advertisers go back to not using stock imagery so that we can better tell stories. Lindsay Stewart is the CEO and co-founder of Stringr, a company that helps major media organizations source custom video. She's a former network news producer and a subject matter expert on how to leverage video. And on this episode, we'll discuss taking a more localized approach to video for news stations or brands, storytelling, TV of tomorrow, the changing times for local news agencies, how brands and even publishers like newspapers can take video to tell better stories and think like a publisher, and much, much more. So let's tune in to a video expert with a newsworthy shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and your career today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course.
I started as a TV news producer. I spent about 10 years in that career where I spent 7 of them at the Fox News Channel where I coordinated politics for the western part of the country. And then I kind of got an itch and wanted to learn a little bit more about business and worked for Bloomberg for about a year. And it was there that
That's a shift in controversy and temperament.
I'm very agnostic. I just like to tell the news. It was there that I basically, learned more about business, wanted to know more, and went back to business school. I also made another shift and started working for ABC News based out of the LA Bureau, so doing stuff for World News Tonight and Good Morning America. And it was at the time where you'd come in, you get a story assigned to you, and sometimes you didn't really have a lot of video. Mm-hmm. And, there were great services that still exist, like Storyful, but everyone was kind of battling it out for the same clips on social media. And so, like a lot of entrepreneurs say, I thought there had to be a better way. And so what I was doing was going to business school and working in news and sitting around with a bunch of people who knew a lot about product and about engineering in business school. And so we created this platform that is Stringr. Now we have about 100,000 videographers on one side of the platform that are based in the UK and also in the United States where we started. And our customers, major media customers, and increasingly brands and ad agencies are coming to us, asking us for video that they want, whether it be very high-end, interviews with their CEO, all the way down to kind of more UGC style, kind of on-the-fly kind of stuff.
So was it out of frustration from not having enough footage as a producer that drove you for the impetus for this with your partner?
Yeah, so it's frustration or desire or whatever you'd like to call it. It was, I need more video. I need more video quickly. I need more video in certain cases more cost effectively. I can't always fly to that place to get video with my crew. And I work for the networks where we actually spent money to get video.
Yeah.
And I had started my career in local news and thought this will also be a great tool for local news as they're trying to expand their reach and increasingly their budgets get pinched.
Well, so what's life as a CEO of a tech startup been like, other than not getting a lot of sleep and having to go get funding and all the other fun stuff that goes with hiring people and starting?
I would say it's one of the best adventures of my life. And like I said, I was a network TV news producer for years and years. So that was a great adventure. And so that comes with slings and arrows. Some of the parts of it are fun and some parts are really not that fun, right? Because, I always say I walk into a room and little rabbits are jumping around. I throw them into boxes. I put bows around them. And the next morning I walk in and I've realized that those rabbits that I had, contained have had babies. And so now I have to go figure out how to fix kind of the next day's issues. What I would say, though, is the cool part is you get to use your whole brain. The parts of your brain that are well equipped to handle an issue and the parts of your brain that need to grow or at least call in a friend or an advisor to get something done. There's really no other role on the planet where you get to use your whole brain and be challenged every single day. So if you're the kind of person that likes a decent challenge, then this is a great role for you, especially if you have an idea that you really believe in.
Well, so I met you at the TV of Tomorrow conference, at a TV video advertising conference. What were your thoughts on that conference in general? I didn't, we both spoke there, but what's your take? I know you speak at other events. What's your take on that conference, the other conferences you've attended, and sort of the state of the industry and what you're hearing?
Yeah, I think from a quality of conferences, it was just a really high quality
Yeah.
conference. And the reason being is there were a lot of what I call power brokers there,
Exactly.
experts
Yeah.
there. There are bigger conferences that have some of those same people, but they kind of get lost in a sea of other folks who are, well meaning and want to learn, but don't necessarily kind of have their finger on the pulse as much as TV of Tomorrow attendees did. So I would say it was just an awesome conference, and I was really excited to be able to participate on a panel there. I think the kind of key takeaways, some of which I'm an expert in, some of which I am not. One is just how closely attribution is being followed now as it relates to video and the evolving landscape there. And like I said, I'm a novice in that. It's not my core competency, but it is super important to our customers who are increasingly trying to figure out what their return on investment for video is going to be. So I care about what my customers care about, and I, was more of a student of that at that conference. The other kind of piece of it, which of course Stringr falls more kind of and is more aligned with, is this need for more localized video and to figure out a mechanism to attain it. So, we heard it from Freewheel, we heard it from a lot of other players there that, we need more ways to localize video content, whether it be, the actual content that is driving viewership. So the reason, the story or the segment that, viewers want to see, or the actual video ad, the advertisement on top of that video. Increasingly, you're seeing marketers and ad agencies trying to figure out how to localize the messaging. And one of the key ways to localize messaging is have video that speaks to the people who are watching and being advertised to. It's one thing to sell your Coke with a big, broad, beautiful message. It's another thing to sell a Coke on a park bench that you recognize. And so Stringr enables the shooting of video pretty much anywhere and in a cost-effective manner, so you don't have to make so many decisions when you're shooting your ad campaigns.
I agree, and I think we've heard addressable at quite a few of the conferences now. Attribution, I was glad to hear. I'm still shocked that it's not front and center. Can you consider that most people are spending anywhere from a third to a half of their budget still on TV? The fact that they don't know where that money's being spent, it's still crazy to me when so much is being able done with digital. And I'm glad that was a part of the focus. I love that local news was part of the focus for a change, because I don't think the TV part of where we just consume TV, especially with things like the news, has been talked about the most. And getting sort of prepped for my conversation with you, I also spoke with a friend of mine, and we talked about the localized video component and what newsrooms are running through now. And he works at a station. He works, and this is a common problem for him as well in a local market, which is a pretty good sized market. But he, is constantly looking for video for the news, for weather, whatever. And he, you just mentioned something, how a lot of the larger channels, the larger stations, for example, ABC and Fox, had money to go spend on this. If you're a ABC or Fox affiliate, though, in Charlotte or San Diego or Memphis or wherever, you may not have the money to go spend on that. And but the news is still happening for those people. So kind of unpack your thoughts around what that kind of content is doing for the market and how you're helping enable people get that content, because it's still so frustrating when you see a news story. When I go see a news story and I see Getty type imagery for the 50th time, nothing against Getty images, stock imagery, but when I see stock photography or videography as opposed to what's actually going on in the market live, it becomes a problem for me as a consumer of that TV. And I just love being able to see more actual content.
Yeah, I think to kind of unpack it in a way that's kind of two-pronged, the value proposition we have for local stations is that we can get them more video, we can get it faster, I guess it's three-pronged, and we can expand their geography in an instant. And I guess the geography piece and the fast piece are, kind of almost one and the same sometimes. So if you think about how a local station operates every day, they have a morning meeting where they decide on the stories that their reporters and their videographers are going to go shoot. And that's a limited subset of human beings that they have on staff that can go and do things. And they have to cover certain things. If the mayor is saying something in their town, they're probably going to cover it. And so quickly their resources get eaten up. And so their ability to differentiate themselves in any way starts to be really pinched. So if you've ever turned on the local news, you see one station, then you see another station, and often they're covering very much the same stories because it's their kind of their duty to. Those are the important stories of the day, but they're trying to figure out how to, be different than their competitors, really. And so what we enable at Stringr is, well, hey, you could ask us to go shoot the mayor's press conference. Sure. But maybe you're probably going to send a reporter because you want to, stick it to the mayor and ask him some tough questions, which is, what journalists should be doing. So instead, you have all these 4 or 5 other stories that are just going to kind of hit the floor and nobody's going to cover them. Well, instead, you can go into our system, just type in the video you're looking for, and leverage this enormous population of videographers that will go shoot this video for you, whether it's, a quick interview or a man on the street or some great video from a more far-flung place in your DMA. You can use us to do that. I always tell our new customers who are the local news customers, come in and after your morning meeting, try and break Stringr. Most of these people are pretty entrenched and have seen a lot of tools out there. So every time I say break us, they get a little smile on their face. I go, put in every request for every piece of video you've ever wanted for that day. And what you're going to find is you're going to net out 3, 4, maybe even 5 stories a day that you weren't even going to get under your normal framework. And of course, our model, you don't have to hire a whole other videographer. It can flex with you. You can use this more on the weekends and a little less on Mondays, so it can flex with your staff. So I would say our most successful customers with the products are the ones that come and try and break us.
I think about weather. Somebody sees a tornado or captures a lightning strike or there's a house fire somewhere. You're going to do that with the man on the scene as opposed to a news crew that you send out an hour later that shows up. But TV local news loves having that kind of footage on there because they show it all the time now in the national news. What advice do you give to the videographers though who are looking to start creating this kind of content for you so that they're, I don't know, a lot of people are trying to get their names out there, if you will.
Sure. Well, we run a 24/7, what we call a curation desk. And so what those people on my team do is they are kind of that middleman or middlewoman in between our customer requests and the videographers that are on our platform. And so the basic mechanics that go into that is oftentimes, we have, videographers on our roles, within our Stringr system that kind of already know what they're doing. But then there's a subset of them that very much want to learn. And that's where the curation team comes in, and we have an ability in real time to give them more information. We also have tutorial videos that we send to our videographers telling them in certain situations, like here's how to shoot rain, because a lot of people don't know how to shoot rain. Here's how to shoot an interview. Here's how to shoot a crowd. Here's how to shoot a sequence. So we have a lot.
Here's how to turn the phone, sideways.
Please turn your phone. For the most part, although some of our customers every once in a while ask for vertical video. So we have real humans, and we very much believe that we have customers on both sides. We have the ones who pay us, and then we have the very valuable ones who are providing the video. Mm-hmm. So and I always give my team kind of this analogy. I'm from the West Coast, and my favorite department store is Nordstrom. And I said, treat everyone like they're a Nordstrom, customer. The customer is always not always right, but always find a way to make them feel right and resolve their issue. And so that's how we view both our videographers and, of course, our customers who are, paying the bills. But we definitely want to give our videographers more information. One of the key ways, though, to succeed on our platform, of course, is to provide what I call valuable video that is well composed, video that, kind of follows the directions of the details that we're given. And, in certain circumstances, some of our videographers don't do that. So we hopefully lead them down a path where the next time they understand our system a little bit better, and want to come back to us. And we do have a good return rate based on kind of our hand holding and our coaching of videographers who are newer to our system.
So, I mean, when you left the news industry and went to start this, you didn't just, disappear from them. I'm sure you stayed in contact with a lot of them. Talk about what you're hearing from them about the value of the video they're getting from them. And then also sort of how is the news world changing to really sort of leverage this kind of video?
And when you see them, you mean like other producers?
Other producers, yeah. Absolutely. Other stations.
Yeah. So we get a lot of great feedback from producers who say, we wouldn't have been able to produce this segment without Stringr video. We wouldn't have been able to get video of the, 10 car mechanics that cheated, consumers here, in a day without you. We wouldn't be able to even cover a story in very rural Nebraska without you because we've had to drive too far or the timeline wouldn't have worked out for us. We've, of course, from a management perspective, and the folks that are actually buying our product, like the general managers or the heads of news divisions, they see our key value proposition in just more video, more geography, and not having to always hire a big network crew or a freelance crew to get it. So I'd say that's what we're hearing there. I would say that we have. The differentiating piece is quite interesting. We have stations that really wanted to kind of drive good news and only do that. We've been able to help them source those stories from all over the country, figure out how to shoot them. And I think what is happening and what I love about it is we hear a lot about news deserts. And, there are certain cities that are covered really well, Los Angeles, New York,
exactly.
Miami, yeah. To a lesser degree, Seattle, San Francisco, a good bit. But how about where you live? How many stories do you see from the national news? Well, we can enable that quickly. I, as a national news producer, can walk into Stringr, type in what I want, get an interview with somebody in Memphis, whereas before we might have overlooked that story just because we couldn't get it done in time and it would have cost us a lot of money to do it. So I think we're getting a lot of positive feedback there. And then what we're also able to discover is all these people who are all over the country, once again, so talented, wanted to be involved in news media or wanted to be involved in advertising, but chose a different path because they live in Michigan or Iowa or Illinois. And now we're connecting them to jobs that connect them to kind of the decision makers in Los Angeles and New York. So for me, it's super exciting because we'll be able to access not only stories, but talent all over the country and really connect us in, and not to get overly political, in a time where people who live in urban centers feel quite divided from people who live in less populated areas. Yeah. And what I've always known is there are smart and talented people everywhere, because I was fortunate enough as a network news producer to know, to learn about people from all over the country. But I'm not quite sure that's a theme that's being circulated as much as I would like. So I'm, from an altruistic standpoint, very glad to connect people from all over and realize that we're more the same than we are different.
Well, every viral story didn't start or stop in New York or LA.
Never. I mean, hardly ever.
And there are stories everywhere. But
Yeah.
To your point, I mean, unless something goes viral, you don't see a really great, interesting story that happened in Des Moines.
Yep.
And I don't understand why that has, because those same stories are happening in Kansas City and Tallahassee and wherever. I mean, look at, we were talking about Houston earlier. It's fourth largest city in the country. When's the last time you saw a story about Houston or anything? You got to think that millions of people that live in that metro area have a lot of great stories to tell, just like they are all over the country.
Yeah, and I think it kind of moves to the other question that you had earlier, which is what is changing. So what you saw about 7 years ago is you saw a huge pullback of where major networks were stationing their crews. It's expensive. There weren't maybe there wasn't a daily reason to have them there, and so then they were traveling them all over the nation to other places where they weren't necessarily based. It's not to say that they don't still have their bureaus, but perhaps they have fewer of them. And so that was about 7 years ago, and that was when there's a huge pullback. The revenue is flattening or really going down at the time. Now we're seeing it more flatten, which is, I think, flat is the new up. It's still a lot of money that all these major news organizations are generating, and I think there's kind of like a misconception there. And so, okay, all that's well and good. That's the fact of the matter, and certainly not a story we loved hearing. Now where you are is you're seeing a lot of the major news organizations in particular, but this also applies to brands and advertising, trying to figure out how to localize things again.
Absolutely.
And so they don't have they don't have necessarily that bureau. They don't necessarily have those people in place, but they're still trying to figure out how to tell those stories or capture those moments in places that are now even more hard to reach for them because they took their resources out of there. So, of course, we like that theme and we like that growing theme, whether it's in news or kind of these other verticals that need video, because we enable that. We have people everywhere and we can help tell those stories quickly in localized places. Whereas, a couple of years ago before Stringr existed, that wasn't really possible. So we're glad that we're kind of on trend.
Are you getting that request a lot from brands?
Yeah. So, kind of a fun one, and not to get into other kind of people's deals too much, but we get asked for video off the coast of like African nations. We get video for requests for ski resorts all over the place, because if you're a major audio manufacturer, you're looking for the right content, they call it safe content, to align yourself and your brand with. And so this editorial style content where you get to learn about a ski resort or the top 10 ski resorts, that's increasingly something a lot of these agencies are trying to create so that they can then go out and get the brands interested in it. Well, you can't film 10 different ski resorts in a cost-efficient manner. Well, Stringr can. And so all you have to do is drop a bunch of pins on our map, ask us for video, and you're going to have 10 different people, whether they're in Vail or in Vermont or wherever, shoot that video for you, bring it back as the brand, as the agency that represents the brand, and then you get to assemble this awesome piece of content without having to spend, $30,000 doing
exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, I think of it like almost like with influencer marketing, where you try to humanize and personalize that content a lot more, but localizing it, showing my brand near me is something that, having worked as a brand, you always wanted to relate to somebody locally, and that's a great way of doing it. So what do you think is the future of local news and TV news, especially because we hear all the time that it's obviously everybody's cutting the cords, they're not watching it anymore, but I sit here and thought, as I was prepping for this, how often I would rather, if I'm watching local news, I don't necessarily need to see their local reporter go to a scene. I want to see local video of it. If I'm watching the world news, I don't care if any one of the reporters necessarily goes, because they could do commentary over it with a green screen, but I want to see that localized video of the house on fire or the tornado in there, or some other thing, not necessarily a tragedy, but I'm more interested in watching that as the background than watching them as part of the background, if that makes sense. And I'm wondering if that's what's going to drive a lot of the changes in, one, what your technology allows people to do, and also how local TV is evolving. So that's my stance on it, but I'm curious where you see it going.
I can tell you what I can't ever tell you what the future is going to be. I could tell you what I think the future should be.
Yeah. My crystal ball doesn't work.
Yeah.
I use a magic 8 ball.
I think the world very much needs local stories and
Yeah.
local reporting. That's how we know about our world. It's how we vote. It's such an, they call it, the third pillar of our community journalism for a reason. And, it's great to know about national stories, and it's the stuff I covered for years and years, but that all bubbles up from local issues, right? The immigration issue is a local issue in a lot of places, and we need to be hearing about that story in a lot of places. I think the way people will view local news will very much look like they viewed it a long time ago, but maybe not when they do it. So everyone still, who has any sort of budget for entertainment, as far as I know, still has a television or a very, very big laptop. And so I still think people will watch a lot of video, whether it's news or otherwise, on a larger screen. I think that right now you're seeing a lot of the OTT apps bubble up. I think there is an enormous opportunity.
That I watch on my 65-inch laptop.
There you are.
Yeah.
I think there's an enormous opportunity for a couple of players to really come in and create the best in breed local news app. And there's a lot of good players in that right now, and we're still in the experimental stages of it. So I don't want to, cast aspersions on any of the companies that have put their products out there so far. But I do think from a quality perspective, we should expect that nice, glossy, modern look of how we want to view local news. And that local news is actually going to have to include local news. It can't be a national broadcast because we already have that. And I can put that together with the Stringr backbone. And in fact, we do about 10 local stories a day that we distribute to our partners. So it has to have local. It's gonna have to get granular in a certain sense. And the news agencies or the organizations that are putting this together are gonna have to focus on stories that matter. And so stories that matter are stories that have people behind them that have asked good questions. And so what they will have to go back to a little bit is, here's this journalist, here's this really smart person we've hired. How can we gather content more cost effectively, potentially, and then allow that journalist maybe to do 1 or 2 stories a day, but not have to run around gathering it all the time. I think that's where we fit in nicely, is because we will operate as the gatherers. To a certain extent, my team, because we have a lot of producers on my team, can act as the journalists as well, because they are journalists. But that's a choice that news organizations will make. So I think that the biggies, the big media companies that we know the names of, 1 or 2 of them is going to come up with that product that really speaks to us. And to your point, I don't necessarily think it's going to be as anchor focused as it once was. I do believe, though, people do like some connective tissue.
Absolutely.
They don't necessarily want, a bunch of videos stitched together. But I believe also that the anchor that serves Memphis could also be the anchor that serves Mississippi and Arkansas and a variety of other places. And it'll be a little bit more hubbed. But I do believe humans.
You need a great storyteller.
You need some storytellers. You need some reporters, and you definitely need journalists. I think this is where newspaper companies who have struggled already have a huge opportunity.
I just talked about that yesterday. They have the biggest opportunity to take this over because local news, for the most part, has failed in doing a lot of this. And you've got people who couldn't get in because of a lot of federal regulations that wouldn't allow them to merge with TV stations.
Those are gone.
But now they're their own publishers.
Yeah, those are gone. With OTT,
Yeah.
anybody who has a core competency in news can get into this business.
Exactly.
The problem that publishers had, other than, their revenue running away from them, is that their core competency is not video. At least it wasn't. And, some of them have gotten very good at it. And others haven't. And that's, again, where I think our company and other kind of innovative companies come into play and can be super helpful, because our core competency is video.
Well, and I could not agree more, because I know this is a concern for my friend that works at a station. I've talked to other people who see this as a concern. They know that it's hurting revenues because of where the internet, if you think of YouTube as the biggest channel in the world, no one video, even if it goes viral, it's going to have a hard time keeping up with a station that can reach hundreds of thousands of people with a newscast. But it's got a lot of advantages like time, because when you watch something on YouTube or Instagram TV or anything else, it's more reactive from a time stamp. And I've noticed this because I was traveling recently on vacation. I wanted to catch up with what was going on the world news. I pulled up their app. I watched it while I was driving, or listened to it while I was driving. Always, don't text or watch anything while
do
driving.
Anything illegal.
Don't do anything illegal. I won't say which state it was in case they have a law, but I listened to the news in the background, and I noticed that they weren't posting the news, the world news, until 2 hours later because they wanted to run it separately for the West Coast. And I thought, this is the kind of stuff that has destroyed a lot of appointment type television. People want to see it when it happens, on demand. It giving a platform when somebody posts localized content allows them to go grab that content much more quickly than waiting until 5 o'clock or 5:30 or whatever your news time is for this kind of content.
People, I mean, the thought process around that people are going to wait for information,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not happening anymore.
exactly.
And so you need to give information as it is ready. And we have some of our broadcast partners who really understand that and have put news on a wheel. And they are these interchangeable blocks that can come in and out as they have updates. And you need to be doing that. And you need to be doing that in a credible fashion. I do think, though, where the kind of veteran news organizations have a huge leg up over anyone who's ever going to try it is they have a lot of credibility. They
Absolutely.
have a lot of credible humans. And so, you're starting to see that, subscriptions for at least kind of the major newspapers are actually on the rise. Well, that's because people are starting to realize that they need credible information, not just information.
Exactly.
And so I love that. And I think that taking a beat and retraining the viewers and retraining the readers to understand that, yeah, you can hear something, but it's like hearing it on the playground when you were a little kid. It may or not be true. Then you need to go to a place that really cares about vetting that and let them take a beat to do their job well, right? But that doesn't mean, I think there's two elements of kind of any news organization. There's kind of the almost megaphone element. This is what has been announced. This is what we are hearing. This is what the White House said. That's okay. That's not necessarily journalism, but that's keeping people informed. And then there's the other side of it, which is, and now we're going to dig deeper and ask questions that, when even you read it, you were like, oh, well, President Trump said X. Well, what was the reaction? And who's holding his feet to the fire and that sort of thing? And that will always take time. Interactions between human beings will always take time, but that's what drives good journalism, and we want to support that. So I'm always telling people, if you aren't a subscriber to at least a few publications, like some national, some regional, some very local, well, then you don't really care about being a knowledgeable person in our society anymore.
Yeah, I don't care if it's what brand it is, whether it's a newsroom, a corporation, or an influencer. It's trust is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Journalism allows that with storytelling, and most of these brands that are newsrooms have spent 50 years at least building trust, and that goes such a long way with helping differentiate video that somebody just wants to go viral versus what actually is real and what happened and can help a newsroom tell a story.
And I think that's where kind of broadcast really comes in, because they still get to sell some sort of ad, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And largely they can provide, and I think OTT actually enables this as well, because there are other ways to monetize a free version of things that might be ad supported. And I think that it's kind of, we've even modeled it out so that we can have good conversations with our customers on the TV side. Is here's a version with ads, not dissimilar to like Hulu,
mm-hmm.
and then here's a version without ads. If you don't like ads and you can afford it, what I want to make sure is, just like we cared about everybody having access to libraries and schools, I want to make sure that everybody does have access to good information. Because what I would hate to think is that the least equipped, the people who are really trying to kind of get their foot in the door financially in this country, are the ones who are being given not incomplete or, in worst case scenarios, bad information, because we all have the same vote, and I want our population to be as educated as possible, and journalists do play a very, very important role in all of that.
Do you worry at all as a former news producer that most or many of the stations will fail at this transformation? Like something, you see that we haven't seen yet. And you just said, we hope that some of the ones figure out figure this out, and there'll be a couple of them that will rise to the top. That also means that a couple of them or more will fail.
Yeah.
And I, oftentimes with so many things, especially with how the internet has disseminated so much, you don't see enough rise to the top.
Yeah.
And I'm worried a little bit that some of them won't be smart enough to figure this out, and will lose good trusted sources at the same time.
Yeah, and they will. And I think it's I don't know if inevitable. I don't know that every city needs 5 local stations.
Agreed.
I don't know that is the case. I don't know which media companies should be the winners at this point in time. So I do hope they can all stick it out and really fight their way to the top. I think we as a society can be okay with a little bit of competition, not 5.
Absolutely.
Maybe 3.
Yeah, they need
something like
some
that.
to keep pushing themselves.
Of course, because none of us, very few people and very few organizations operate in a vacuum that well. But I would say that, that's kind of the key. And so, watching, because most of the stations are owned by pretty large station groups at this point, and kind of watching how their teams execute and try things out. I want to see them all in the game right now, because they all have kind of a different idea and a different take and how it's going to be done. And so I definitely want them to stick around for at least the short term. And then once we see some kind of winners emerge, I think one of the trends that is a little dangerous is kind of this element of safe content.
Yes.
So safe content is easily
Agreed.
monetized, because brand, you're a car dealer. You don't want to necessarily align your brand with a stabbing. You want to align your brand with, something nice.
Right.
And I think that is a little nerve-wracking. That's more nerve-wracking to me than anything else, because of course, everybody's trying to figure out at these news organizations how to stay alive and how to have content that people engage with. But I think that there's just a huge transformation in how sales teams are going to sell their packages, and we're going to have to see that the way they sell it subsidize some of the kind of harder edged news, and then of course they can align themselves with a awesome story about the the picnic on Saturday, the community picnic as well.
Well, the good news is this really just keeps pushing them to improve their content, which is what everybody should be focused on.
Yeah.
Any kind of brand. So, Lindsay, you're on a Shark's perspective, sitting with a guy with another shark shirt. You're not that far from
shark shirt.
You're not that far from the Wall Street Sharks. I have to ask this: what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
What is my favorite kind of shark? I guess I love the great whites. I grew up
Thank
in
you.
the San Francisco Bay, and
Yeah.
we get to see those in
Outside
our aquarium.
the
Nice sharp teeth.
Actually, I did go to the aquarium, the aquarium of the Bay.
Yeah.
At Pier 39 or whatever. I went to that aquarium. Well, Lindsay, it's a special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked?
Can't wait.
All right, here we go. Number 1, portrait or landscape?
Of course, landscape.
Thank
right?
you. Number 2, TV or video?
Video, but don't fool yourself.
Yeah.
You're watching it on TV.
Exactly. Number 3, local news or national news?
Everything starts local.
Okay. Number 4, YouTube or Vimeo?
That's hard.
It is hard because somebody that's in this industry appreciates Vimeo.
Yeah. Vimeo is a beautiful brand.
It's like Google or Bing,
I'm going to say Vimeo.
Okay.
I have Google friends, but I love Vimeo because they're driving quality.
There you go. And the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Really good cornbread.
Thank you. So, Lindsay, where can people find out more about you, follow your thought leadership, find out more about the company, and more?
So you can come to our website, stringr.com, to learn more just about the company. You can always connect with me in LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. I love hearing from
Stringr
everyone.
without the E.
Oh, yes.
Couldn't afford
we
the
couldn't
E.
afford that
Yeah.
vowel. And we do, if you're a videographer, we do tweet out some best practices. So come check us out there too.
Perfect. Thank you very much for being with us today on
Yeah.
Shark's Perspective.
Thanks.
So there was my conversation with Lindsay Stewart, the CEO and co-founder of Stringr, a company that helps major media organizations source custom video. She's a former network news producer and a subject matter expert on how to leverage video. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, if you lived in a location like St. Louis and you were watching a video of an advertisement about the beaches in Miami, then you want to see the actual footage from the beaches in Miami. That seems obvious, but so many brands have relied on generic footage of an anywhere beach. And when you drill it down even further to news footage of a house on fire in your local St. Louis community, then you want footage from that neighborhood. If there's tornado damage in Topeka, then you don't want aerial footage from a less damaged community in Tulsa, just because relatively speaking, the flat land looks the same. So if you don't have a man or woman on the scene, don't just rely on stock imagery or video if you have a better option. Look for a video shot by someone near the scene. It may not be as well produced as by a professional videographer, but if you have no other option, then the local and authentic footage will likely resonate a lot more with your audience. That's not just the case in news, but also with brands. Second, the news is changing, especially local news. Yes, the glossy is nice, but the news has to focus on, as Lindsay said, stories that matter to you. So we know in digital marketing that video generally scores better than static, and we know that authenticity is key, but probably more important is that people look at the local near me, if you will, strategy as a major part of a best practice. So localized, authentic video is really key. And what else does it help do? I brought up an example in Houston, the fourth largest city in population. When's the last time you saw a great story from there? Or Boston, or Detroit, or Seattle, or Tampa? What it should tell you is that stories happen everywhere, and not just in a few key cities, whether you're a news organization in New York or LA, or a brand based in Chicago or Dallas. Stories happen everywhere, and if your customers and consumers are there, find stories that matter to that populace as well. And it helps to have video near me, wherever I am or wherever you are. Third, newspapers have such an opportunity today. A lot of them have been virtually destroyed or gone under due to shifts in print, but the reporting has generally remained strong in quality. And they've been building brand credibility in their reputation for 50 years. And for years, regulation wouldn't allow a TV station to merge with a newspaper. But with the internet, the newspapers have a major opportunity to become the local publisher also with video. Maybe it's Stringr video to tell a story. A YouTuber can't own this space because that 50-year-old brand has taken the time to build that reputation in news. So I preach to and educate brands all of the time to think like a publisher, but even publishers need to rethink that way as well. If I'm a cord cutter, then why can't I consume my news video included on a local gazette's website? Because they haven't put together a glossy studio set? No way. It's the stories that truly matter, especially the local ones. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. So find something you're really passionate about. For me, it's going to the beach and swimming with sharks. So go use your whole brain and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.